Good afternoon, everyone. While we are all currently in different locations, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we live and work. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to any elders who may be joining us today. I'm Ruth Gormley. I lead the strategic marketing team at Creative Victoria, and my preferred pronouns are she and her. I want to welcome you all to this second Recovery Roadmap webinar, reaching new audiences in a time of crisis. Creative Victoria is very proud to be working with ArtsHub to present these webinars as part of our creative exchange. We hope you find them inspiring and useful. Some housekeeping. This webinar is being live captioned. If you want to see the captions, just follow the link that'll go up in the chat now. You will need to be using Google Chrome for them to work. We're also recording these sessions, so any questions you ask will be on record. And the recorded webinar will be available through ArtsHub and the Creative Exchange page on the Creative Victoria website. We will be sending out a survey following the webinar, so please fill that in and let us know how we've gone and what you'd like to see covered in future. I'll now pass over to Richard Watts from ArtsHub, who will be moderating today's discussion. Richard.
Thank you, Ruth. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second in our Recovery Roadmap webinars, reaching new audiences in a time of crisis. My name is Richard Watts. I'm ArtsHub's Performing Arts Editor. I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Kulin Nation, as is one of our guests, Brook, Powell, Director of the Yarra Valley Writers Festival. We'll also be joined today by Beck Cole, Director of Latrobe Regional Gallery and Latrobe Performing Arts, who's speaking to us from Gurnai country. So, COVID can provide the opportunity to find new supporters for your arts organisation, or can it? Today, we're going to explore how Latrobe Regional Gallery reinvented their space for digital delivery and learn about the Yarra Valley Writers Festival, who took their very first festival online. Before we begin, some additional housekeeping. If you have questions that you want to ask, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please use that, and we'll select a couple of the questions to put to the speakers a little bit later on in proceedings. And our hashtag, if you want to amplify the discussion, please use the hashtag Recovery Roadmap Webinars on social media. And now I'd like to hand things over to Beck Cole from Latrobe Regional Gallery.
Oh, hi everyone. It's really lovely to be here from the beautiful Latrobe Valley, and thanks for the introduction, Richard. I'm here to talk to you today about LRC Online, which is our digital delivery platform that we invented earlier this year when Latrobe Regional Gallery, like many public galleries across Australia, were forced to close at the beginning of the year due to the pandemic. A little bit about me. I've come into this role in January this year, so a really great time to get started as a new director. But, you know, it has kind of offered an opportunity to look at things differently, look at the role of public galleries a little differently, and develop some new ways of working with community. So first and foremost, our approach to online delivery was not to try and replicate what happens when you go to a gallery. So going to a gallery is a very physical experience. You know, you turn up, it has an atmosphere, there's space between you and the work that you see. You experience it spatially as well as visually, as well as all of the other kind of elements of, you know, like treating yourself to a gallery visit will bring. And so we were really mindful of trying not to replicate that in a digital realm, but instead looking at the platforms we had available to us and then reinventing those as ways to provide access to contemporary art, which for me is the real purpose of public galleries, is to provide that access to art to like the broad number of community members that we have, as well as our visitors and our supporters. One thing we were really mindful of avoiding was the big digital glut. So something I noticed really early on in responses to the pandemic, and you know, many galleries put out a lot of content really quickly. We held back a little. And made sure that the content that we put out was really related to our exhibition program and also to our collections. And, you know, development of a web platform as a way to talk about collection, I think, is one of the great things that has come out of the pandemic for us. So to begin with, we did digital versions of some of our existing workshop activities. Then we looked at filmed walkthroughs, which were narrated by our senior curator, David O'Halloran, and they're really quite wonderful ways to experience the exhibitions. We then looked to curating content, so opening up a portal and a space for people to explore different elements of contemporary art. So that's been really, really successful. After that, we started looking at, well, what are some things that you can deliver online that you can't actually experience in a gallery? And a really special project that emerged from that was called Listen In. So that was a project where we paired collection works with sound art. And so you visit our website and you experience them together. You look through the works, you listen, you contemplate what the connection might be, and you experience art in a whole different way. We were really quite lucky to have within our team the capacity to be able to develop this online content really quickly. And I know for many galleries and other arts organisations, that's not there. I have a filmmaker on staff in my performing arts team. So really, really fortunate to have that experience and expertise and access to be able to produce really quality walkthrough filmed experiences. And what's kind of like emerged for us is that we've been able to reach our local audiences in a new way. So often public galleries in regional areas, the communities might not be as connected to those gallery spaces as metropolitan Melbourne, and that's definitely was the case for our followship on our social media pages. And through this process, we've actually been able to connect with our local audience quite a lot more, strangely enough. And so we feel that when we're able to actually open again, then it's going to feel like it's a more accessible thing for people in the community who may not have wandered into the gallery before and not seen that as part of their consideration set of things that they do. So although it's been a really, really challenging time, and it will continue to be a really challenging time for public galleries, there are opportunities there for us. There are opportunities to link to parts of the community who may not have considered the gallery as something that they do and part of their life. And I guess that's what I'll leave you with, is that yes, it's difficult. Yes, we've needed to pivot, and we're going to continue to need to pivot over and over again at the moment. But there are opportunities to connect there, and that's the benefit that we've been able to bring. So thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Beck. And we'll have some questions following on from that in just a moment. But now, Brooke, please, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming along. Well, as Richard outlined in the introduction, we'd never done a festival before. So we weren't just finding a new audience in a crisis, we were finding a new audience full stop. But we did start our process thinking that we were going to do a bricks and mortar festival, and that had to very quickly change. And I think we did the turnaround in about a fortnight or 3 weeks, which was crazy at the time. But anyway, I guess what we needed to look at first is what was our original audience versus what was a new audience going to look like. So originally we would have been talking heavily into Melbourne. We were activating our local community. We had partnerships in place with people like our local RACV Country Club, with Tarrawarra Museum, the Yarra ArtsHub, and Yarra Rangers Tourism. And we were looking at doing writing courses and activations throughout those different organisations. So that had to change, obviously, when we went online. But it wasn't all bad. It was challenging, but it wasn't all bad, because all of a sudden we had this broader audience that we could talk to. So we could talk to overseas people, potentially. We had a stronger interstate possibility, and we were really trying to work out how to talk to a youth audience in a meaningful way as well. So I guess what we did is we looked at that and went, there's going to be a lot of digital activity very soon. What is going to make ours look any different to anybody else's? And we thought about our brand personality. which is really our regional personality. So who were we going to be in the Writers Festival landscape? Because we could have done, you know, an amazing program, but if nobody remembered that they'd watched a Yarra Valley program, it probably wasn't worth our while. We actually needed to anchor people out here. So we picked up on things like nature, climate change. We brought speakers in that were from our region. So our programming spoke to these audiences and also spoke to new people that we might not have originally spoken to, people that were very active in the local forests, that were active in climate change regionally and then more broadly. And we brought them into the conversation. We didn't go into the food and wine conversation, which is, it's what the Yarra Valley is known for, because that's not our strength. We stayed with arts and climate. And then I guess we looked at the challenges of going digital for a regular audience. There's an older demographic that come to Writers Festivals. So what were we going to do around that so that we could retain what would have been the regular Writers Festival people? We didn't want to ostracize them, but we also wanted to create a festival atmosphere. And that was why we went with the Saturday, which was a full 10 hours of live streamed, essentially live streamed TV, except we just did it digitally, to give people that full day of festival activity. But it was a one-click link. I thought that maybe older people or people not, and we were all probably not as savvy digitally then as we are now, I didn't want them to have to click in and out of things all day. So we did that. We anchored them with video of our region regularly, and we used local talent where we could, as well as bringing in some incredibly interesting other Australian talent to flesh that out. And also, I guess we found that it was interesting being able to bring people in from interstate via Zoom that would have been logistically a bit harder. So in terms of our audience, we had anticipated 80% to be from the local region and Melbourne East. We had 27% of our audience was interstate, and we had 4% of our audience was international, and 37% was from the broader Yarra Ranges area. So we were impressed with that, and it felt surreal to have 4% of our audience from international, but anyway, little Yarra Valley. So I guess the strengths, what I would say in terms of developing new audiences in a time of crisis is to partner with people that have similar needs, and also to keep in mind that the audience, what they need, and how to talk to them in a way that resonates with them at the time. Even our pairings with the programming, we kept it very friendly. We were figured that by May the 9th, people were a bit afraid around the edges, and some of them were afraid. They were still full of fear in terms of what the future looked like. They needed conversation that was challenging in some ways, but we made sure that our program offered hope. And what else did I want to tell you about that I thought was just in terms of the new audiences is, we had discussions a lot about why do people go to writers' festivals? Like, what are the emotional drivers that get people there? And how could we infuse that in what we were offering people? So that sort of connection, etc. So we had the 10-hour Saturday day that I mentioned. Then we also had these Sunday sessions that were 1 hour on a Sunday afternoon that were a lot sort of cruisier for people, and people could they only had to sit down for an hour and take that in. And then we also had, we have a book club that we still run once a month, and that's very chatty. It's just Michael Veach and I who, we're not experts in anything. So we speak for half an hour about our impression of the book, and an author comes in afterwards. And we have 60 people minimum, sign up to that every month, and we have people from all over Australia still. We have at least 15% of that audience is interstate, and we get lovely messages about how they feel as though they're part of a community. And I think that's what we were really trying to create for people, is an online community that when it does go to bricks and mortar, well, we would hope we've got some sort of dual delivery at best next year, and 42% of the people that responded to our survey said they would like a dual delivery next year. And they can still participate. And the pay, I probably run out of time, I'll get off in a sec. The pay as you feel was also very important to us because, one, I just thought we needed accessibility. People were losing their jobs everywhere, people, but I wanted them to still feel able to turn up. People that could pay, they can pay. And I think it's very important for us to remind people that you have to pay for online content to keep the arts sustainable moving forward, because this sort of dual delivery isn't going away in a hurry. All right, thank you. I will pass it over to Richard again.
Great. Thank you, Brooke. Okay, so a number of questions are coming in via the Q&A function, and we've also had some questions in advance. And I guess a question for both Beck and Brooke is, to what extent do you think we're at risk of Zoom fatigue? Have either of your organisations had any indication of whether people are going to want to continually, wanting to continue to engage digitally after lockdown?
I'm sorry, did you give that to me?
It's a question for both of you. Let's start with Beck.
Look, I think there is like a sense of Zoom fatigue that's creeping in for people. We're mediating all of our social life through screens at the moment, and you know, I've even noticed for myself, I'm starting to look to things that are less screen based in the way that I want to kind of spend my free time. But I think there is a middle place with these things where screens and real life activity can come together. We're actually looking at a project later this year where we'll send out packs to people in the community that sign up to actually be able to make a piece of art which we'll install in the windows in the gallery. So it's still accessible from outdoors, but it's still a real life activity that you can do alongside the digital workshop, which will take you through how to make things.
Right. And Brooke?
I think there is absolutely a potential for Zoom fatigue, and that's why we would love to do dual delivery if we were going to do something again next year. At the moment, though, I don't want us to stop doing anything. So I guess it's bespoking, for want of a better word, what we do, and just making sure that we're not giving people too much of the same thing. But yeah, and I think that goes back to that sense of place, so that whatever we're doing, it has something to do with our overall brand personality. So it differentiates it from other people's programming in some way.
Mm-hmm. Beck, a question specifically for you. You've talked about the fact that there's been a huge local uptake on social media kind of over the past months. I'm curious, how do you intend to either capitalise on that or monetize that, given that you've had this influx of local followers, many of them for the first time?
I don't think we'll probably look at monetizing that in any way. As a gallery, a public gallery that's funded by local government, that's not really our role to monetize. But I certainly encourage anyone else out there with a great business idea for digital delivery to certainly monetize things. In terms of capitalizing, I really see it as an additional doorway into what we do as a gallery. So it starts to break down that idea of like who's invited and who's allowed to be in a gallery space, and if we can reconnect with those people that have been engaged, whether it's through activities they're doing with their kids or watching an artist in conversation or sparking curiosity for contemporary art, and then we can then follow that up with this kind of call to action of explore more, which is what we've tried to do with the part of our service at the moment, which is about curating content for people to explore, and it's to generate curiosity. So to answer the question, it's really about using the context that we've made through this time, and then just keeping the welcome mat open.
Great. And Brooke, for you specifically, you mentioned that idea of developing audiences by using emotional drivers. And I'm just wondering if you could briefly talk to what those emotional drivers were and how you actually utilized them to bring people in.
Well, I think they were probably present in our programming and also our narrative in terms of the way when we went out and we were explaining why we wanted people to do the pay as you feel. It wasn't asking for money as much as just suggesting that this is the right thing to do, that it was an exchange so that the writers got paid, and it was all sort of just a fair exchange. But when we chose people, I'll give the example of Angela Savage and Christos Chalkis, they're such lovely friends, and they're so warm together when they're in conversation. And so we put them up as panelists together in a conversation, and people really felt that friendship. So they were watching that, and we're talking about a country that had been, locked away and lonely for, months, or it felt like months anyway at that point. And, and having David Williamson and Hanny, who are old friends, talking to each other. And it was a deliberate choice to put the gorgeous Claire Bowditch at the end, because she's like a warm hug, that woman. And we gave everyone an apple pie recipe that was from Claire's mother. So every ticket holder got sent an apple pie recipe from Claire's mum. And it was just that sense of sharing and trying to make people feel good about themselves and about the world, when I think they needed it. I mean, sometimes we need really rigorous, academic discussion, and sometimes we need a hug.
Absolutely. Another quick question, Brooke. You've got people from overseas. Did you reach out to them directly and deliberately, or how did you actually reach that audience?
Just digitally. I just did some digital ads through social media, and it was, I have to admit, it was fairly random. There was a little bit of strategy behind some of it, but I just did a test and see, and we got some pickups. So that is probably something that I would put a stronger strategy around for next year, seeing it just was, barely a strategy for luck this year. So next year I would certainly go into it more. And we had a lot of feedback from those people. We had a woman from New York turn up to our book club last month because they can't. She was saying that she finds it very hard to access Australian authors, and because our main focus is around Australian authors, people that are living overseas seem to think that they look to us because that's what we're predominantly showing.
Mm-hmm. A two-pronged question for both of you, and we're taking questions, some of the questions as they come in. Sadly, we only have about 6 minutes left, so I'll shut up. But Beck, I'll start with you for this one. How do you work successfully to bring in youth audiences? And conversely, what about older audiences? One of our questions has been submitted by somebody who describes themselves as a Luddite. And kind of thinking about that, kind of different strategies for different generations. Can you speak to that for a moment?
I think absolutely different strategies for different generations. And so for the youth kind of part of things, I think for us, that's probably not an audience that we're meeting right now, but something that we are keen to meet in the future. And really that comes down to programming. So, the program needs to be appealing to the demographic or the audience that you're going towards. And, we have planned some great public programs to really invite young people into the gallery, but of course we've had to put that on hold until January, Feb next year. And that's kind of working with existing groups that are already meeting, and then kind of drawing them through and spreading word of mouth in that way. In terms of older audiences, again, they're visitors to the gallery and they're really great patrons of galleries. And, we've sort of, I guess there's opportunities where we can, say, work with our library services to get information out to older audiences. I'm thinking about a publication for later in the year as a way to reach some of those audiences and look at the delivery mode, you know, working alongside our libraries that are doing a click and collect and also a book delivery service. So there are ways of reaching people where they're at. In terms of the digital kind of divide that happens between older patrons and younger patrons, there's only so much we can really do to address that. But I did experience a really interesting theatre work the other night, which is based on a phone call, which so there are ways and ways of kind of meeting people where they are.
Right. Brooke, again, do you want to pick up on that, particularly kind of what was successful with your youth audiences and what would you change in order to then perhaps adapt to older audiences?
I think our experience with the youth audiences this year was that we would like to do more of it. We actually had a whole youth program for the Friday, which we had to cancel, obviously, face-to-face, and that booked out very quickly, which was incredibly exciting for us. And I didn't really turn that into a purchasable or even a shareable product online as it was very quickly. I couldn't really work out how to do it for the schools because the schools were in flux as well as to they didn't know whether they were doing online delivery, they didn't know whether they were going to be at the school. So that was all in flux. So what happened was we ended up doing these very bespoke conversations with schools. Like with Woodley School, we did 3 sessions that they sent me a brief of what they need, and there's the different school groups that they had that they wanted to engage. And I put a program together for them, and we did 3 sessions for them, like that was designed for their students and for their needs at the time. And that worked really well, and it was incredibly satisfying for us and for the school. And we were looking at offering something like that going into next year, and even possibly ongoing. I'd like to be able to offer that service to the schools. I think if we're going to, you know, talk about developing new audiences, that's, you know, a brilliant place to start. And I think with the older audiences, that one-click thing that I've mentioned, we also partnered with the Eastern Libraries to make sure that we were getting out through their networks. And we talked about the one link, one click was something that we always put in our narrative so that they knew where to go and that they felt that it was going to be a bit simpler. And, you know, it's also just having someone there at every event. Like even on Sunday, when we were doing our John Wood and Michael talk, I sit on the computer until it goes live, because you can just about guarantee that Stan, who's 83, will write to me and say, I can't find my link, Brooke. And I'll send him the link and he gets on and he loves it and he keeps coming back. And there's other people like that. So that's a bit of a maintenance thing. And I know that that's untenable for some people, but at the moment, that's what we do.
Right. Look, a question, perhaps a quick question for both of you. Technical difficulties. How has, for example, the impact of computers crashing, the internet dropping out affected events for both your organisations? Beck, we'll start with you.
We've not ventured into live streaming quite yet. And one of the reasons for that is that internet connections are notoriously difficult in the regions. So we're going to actually trial something live streaming probably towards the end of October as our kind of first start. But in terms of technical difficulties, it's been a process of experimentation. And I guess my message to everyone out there is just to try. You know, things are going to go wrong. You just fix it. It's okay. Like, no one can break the internet. Many have tried. Many have tried. It's not going to happen.
Brooke?
Well, for the Saturday day, we actually had a production company involved because I was too terrified to do an entire day on my own. Because I will also add that before I made the very brave comment that, oh yes, we're going to go online, it'll be fine. I'd never even done a Zoom, so I had no idea what I was, saying that we were about to do. So we did get a proper professional company involved, and even they said to me, look, everyone's very forgiving. So I guess we try not to overreach our capacity. Just as Beck said, we've got terrible internet out here. So we'd use very basic things like Zoom to try to keep, because it doesn't use as much bandwidth as other programs. And sometimes we do pre-record just because it's the safest thing to give someone a good product. And other times, like to do the Saturday, we literally had to get the highest, the council gave us access to the entire Yarra Ranges Council bandwidth. that's the only way it got through.
Great. Good on the council for getting on board. We are out of time. We've had a number of questions we haven't been able to address. I do apologise for that. I do recommend that you get in touch with Beck and Brook via their respective organisations. Check the chat function there for the links to both the Yarra Valley Writers Festival and Latrobe Regional Gallery. Thank you, Beck and Brook, very much for your time. Next week at the same time, that's 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, we'll be talking about communication in COVID and beyond, and we hope that you can join us then. And also, just a very quick reminder that the full video and a full transcript of today's session will be up on ArtsHub by Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us. And again, Brook and Beck, thanks very much for being our guests today.